truly well-informed, it shouldn't feel like a chore, right?
Yeah.
It's really about cutting through all the noise and, getting to what really matters.
Which is what we try to do here.
Exactly.
And today, we're diving deep.
Mm-hmm.
The source is Army Doctrine Publication 1, ADP 1.
ADP 1, right.
Think of it less like, I don't know, a dry manual.
Yeah.
And more like the Army's DNA, the basic principles behind everything it does.
That's a good way to put it. It's not just history. ADP 1, as our source says, it's a living document. It underpins how the Army understands itself professionally, explains its origins, what it does now, its place in the joint military structure.
And it all flows down from the top, legally speaking.
Yeah, the Constitution, Title 10 of the U.S. Code.
Right, which lays out the armed forces' roles and responsibilities. Big stuff.
And Department of Defense directives, too. So, yeah, pretty fundamental.
So our mission for this deep dive.
Let's frame it.
We want to pull out the key insights from ADP 1. Understand the basic reasons why the U.S. needs a strong land force.
We'll touch on history, current duties.
And what the future might demand. Yeah.
So for you, listening in, if you want to grasp important knowledge quickly, thoroughly.
This is your shortcut.
Exactly. Your direct route to understanding this piece of national security without information overload. Okay, let's unpack this. Why is an army just non-negotiable for America?
Well, the source really stresses that this need is constant. It's enduring.
Yeah.
Even if, historically it hasn't always been front and center.
Right. The priority level might shift, but the underlying need doesn't go away.
Exactly. And it's interesting to look back at times when maybe we weren't quite as ready.
Like early World War II?
Yeah.
Or Korea?
Precisely. The source mentions those. It wasn't just about not having enough equipment.
No.
There were doctrinal gaps. Issues ADP 1, in its modern form, really tries to prevent by emphasizing readiness, learning from the past.
And those historical lessons, they came at a terrible cost, didn't they? Lives lost, time bought with sacrifice.
A very steep cost.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder.
It really is. Those initial struggles, they highlight what General Milley mentions in the preface to ADP 1, this moral obligation to make sure our soldiers are fully ready, trained, equipped, led properly.
We just can't afford to forget those lessons. It's a moral imperative.
Absolutely.
And that links directly to the Army's core job, conducting prompt and sustained land combat.
Yeah.
As part of the joint force, of course.
Prompt and sustained. Key words there.
Very key. And there's a quote in ADP 1 from General Welsh, former Air Force Chief of Staff.
Oh, yeah.
He emphasizes basically that you can't achieve lasting control of land, of people just from the air.
Yeah.
You need boots on the ground.
A ground presence is indispensable. That's a critical point. You can, influence from afar, maybe disrupt things.
Sure.
But to actually secure, stabilize, control territory, you need that physical presence.
That's what the document argues. And it says the nation expects the Army to be lethal, agile, adaptable in doing that job.
Lethal, agile, adaptable.
And maybe adding a bit of historical perspective here, Secretary of War Elihu Root said way back in 1899,
Okay.
the real object of having an army is to prepare for war.
Seems obvious, maybe, but there's depth there.
There is. It highlights that even when we're not in a conflict, the Army's main job is still preparing for one or deterring one.
Right. Preparation is deterrence, in a way.
It is. And that prep isn't just about tanks and rifles. It's doctrine, how the Army's organize, training, equipment, leadership, discipline soldiers.
It's all those pieces together.
They build credibility, and credibility is the foundation of deterrence.
So it's proactive. Being ready isn't just about if a fight happens, it's about making potential enemies think twice in the first place.
Exactly. Be so ready they don't want to start anything.
Now, the Army doesn't operate in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
How does it fit in with the other services? Navy, Air Force, Space Force, Cyber Command?
That's a huge point in ADP 1, interdependence. The Army relies heavily on the other parts of the joint force, and they rely on the Army.
Air, land, sea, space, cyber, it's all connected.
Deeply connected. But the source positions the Army as the foundation for joint land operations.
Okay, so when it comes to controlling ground, the Army's the bedrock.
That's the idea. But it's definitely a two-way street. The Army provides critical support back to the others, too.
Like what kind of support?
Things like command and control at the operational level, communications infrastructure, intelligence support, and a lot of the logistics and sustainment, keeping everyone supplied and running.
So it enables the whole joint effort.
It really does. This idea of joint interdependence, the document stresses it, purposefully relying on each other's strengths.
Maximize the total effect.
Precisely. And what's interesting here is the strategic flexibility this provides. The source argues that only ready land forces working jointly give leaders the options they need.
Options for what, specifically?
Options to, well, shape environments proactively, prevent conflicts from blowing up, win decisively if needed, and crucially, consolidate those wins in messy situations.
Okay, so a strong, versatile army gives our leaders more tools in the toolbox for dealing with global issues.
That's the core argument.
Let's dig into that a bit more. What makes land power unique? What can the Army do that, say, the Navy or Air Force can't?
Well, ADP-1 really emphasizes that land power allows leaders to respond decisively, to achieve fundamental goals like destroying enemy forces, actually seizing and holding territory,
To physically taking control.
and breaking the enemy's will to fight back. This is where that quote from Rear Admiral Wiley comes in, the one highlighted in the document.
The man on the scene with a gun.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It makes the point that ultimately control often boils down to having people physically present on the ground.
Yeah, that quote really cuts through. It underscores the human element of conflict.
Intensely human. And this source is clear. Only the Army has the inherent capability and, frankly, the scale.
The sheer numbers and staying power.
Right. To seize, occupy, and control large land areas over time, to provide civil security for populations, to maintain that visible physical presence needed for long-term stability.
It's more than just fighting, then.
Much more. It ties into the Army's whole legacy of service before, during, and after conflict. Warfare is deeply human, and the Army's global presence gives leaders options. Defending interests, protecting the homeland, even disaster relief and humanitarian aid. It's broad.
It is a remarkably broad scope. Now, when we say the Army, who are we actually talking about? It's bigger than just the active duty folks, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
ADP-1 introduces the total Army concept. It's an integrated force, 3 key parts.
Okay, what are they?
You've got the regular Army, the Army National Guard, and the Army Reserve. All vital, all with distinct roles, but designed to work together.
All right, let's break that down. Regular Army, that's the full-time active duty soldiers, the ones ready to go immediately.
Exactly. They're the full-time professionals. And, crucially, supported by the Army Civilian Corps.
Ah, yes, the civilians.
Essential. They provide continuity, technical expertise, institutional knowledge. They're enduring members of the profession, too.
Okay, then the Army National Guard. They have that connection to the states, right?
That's their unique dual mission, yeah. First, they're a state military force. The governor calls them out for floods, fires, civil disturbances, things like that.
Responding to domestic emergencies.
Right. But they're also an operational reserve for the federal Army.
So they can be called up for federal duty.
Exactly. When mobilized federally, they fall under federal authority, the UCMJ, and deploy alongside the regular Army. It's a really flexible structure.
So they bridge state needs and federal military requirements. What about the Army Reserve? How are they different?
The Reserve is purely a federal force, always under presidential command.
Okay.
They get mobilized when needed, and they provide a huge chunk of the Army's sustainment capabilities. Logistics, medical, transport. Think of them as the backbone.
The logistical support.
And also capabilities to expand the mobilization base if needed. Plus, most of the Army's civil affairs experts. Many bring specialized civilian skills, too.
So valuable professional background.
Hugely valuable. But the key takeaway is that these 3 components, regular, guard, reserve, page, they aren't separate armies. They're designed to be one integrated, cohesive whole.
Providing different layers of capability and readiness.
Exactly. Tiered and adaptable.
Seems like a really well thought out system, providing both immediate punch and long-term staying power. Now, ADP-1 also mentions a functional structure, operating forces and institutional force.
Yeah, basically 2 main categories based on function. You have the operating forces.
Those are the ones who deploy and fight.
Pretty much. They're the units organized, trained, equipped specifically for deployment and combat. Most of the Army's strength is here, assigned to combatant commanders globally.
Okay, the tip of the spear, so to speak. What about the institutional force?
Their job is crucial. Generate, prepare, and sustain the operating forces.
So they're the support structure.
A massive and vital one. They stay under Department of the Army Command. This includes the entire training base, basic training, officer schools, professional development.
Building the soldiers and leaders.
Right. And they're the interface with the commercial sector, managing the industrial base that supplies everything.
Equipment, technology, supplies.
All of it. Plus, Army installations themselves are part of this. The bases are power projection platforms. And the institutional force handles those core tasks from Title 10, like recruiting, developing doctrine, managing personnel.
Keeping the whole machine running and evolving.
Exactly. They ensure the operating forces have what they need, when they need it, and are thinking about future needs too. It's a constant feedback loop.
How so?
Lessons learned in combat by the operating forces feed directly back into training development, equipment design, doctrine updates within the institutional force.
So the Army learns and adapts constantly.
That's the goal. It's designed to be a learning organization.
One part fights, the other makes sure they can fight now and in the future. An indispensable partnership.
Definitely.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. The Army today, and looking forward, how does it operate in this, well, complex world we live in?
ADP 1 emphasizes that the Army operates across all domains: air, land, sea, space, cyber. But its primary focus, still the land domain.
Why the land specifically?
It's seen as the most complex because that's where people live. That's where you have diverse cultures, politics, grievances, the root causes of conflict, often.
So success isn't just about military force on land.
Not at all. It requires navigating ambiguity, adapting fast, working with all sorts of partners, allies, local forces, civilian agencies, unified action partners, they call them.
So it's complex human terrain, literally and figuratively.
Very much so.
The source also talks about the Army shaping operational environments. What does that mean in practice?
It means proactive stuff, usually security cooperation activities with other countries.
Working with foreign militaries?
Yeah, direct engagement, helping them build their own defense capabilities, training together, things like that. It builds trust, improves how forces can work together.
Interoperability.
Right, and it sends signals, shows commitment to allies, maybe warns off potential adversaries. It's about setting favorable conditions.
Trying to prevent fires rather than just putting them out.
That's a good way to think about it. Shape the environment to reduce the likelihood of conflict.
But sometimes deterrence fails. The Army has to be ready for combat. What does ADP 1 say about modern land combat?
It paints a picture of operations against smart, dangerous enemies.
Thinking adversaries.
In really tough, fast-changing conditions. And a huge emphasis now is on integrating information and cyber activities.
It's not just kinetic anymore.
Far from it. Success demands protecting your own networks while messing with the enemies, often in places where comms are jammed or denied.
Wow, that requires serious skill.
It does. Highly skilled soldiers, well-trained units, and leaders who can exercise what they call disciplined initiative.
Meaning?
Not just waiting for orders, understanding the commander's intent and acting decisively, adapting to the situation on the ground within those bounds, operating under mission command principles.
Empowering people at lower levels makes sense in chaotic environments.
Absolutely essential. And given its scale and capabilities, the Army is positioned for sustained land combat globally.
That presence, that capability, it's a major deterrent in itself, isn't it?
A huge one. A
Right.
credible deterrent to major powers. And if deterrence fails, it's the force needed for decisive victory.
ADP 1 outlines 4 big strategic roles for the Army.
Yes. Shape operational environments, prevent conflict through deterrence, prevail in large-scale ground combat if necessary, and consolidate gains to achieve lasting outcomes.
Shape, prevent, prevail, consolidate. That covers the spectrum.
It really lays out the why behind the Army's structure and training.
And to do all that, it relies on specific core competencies, key skills.
5 main ones listed in ADP 1. First, prompt and sustained land combat. That's foundational.
Okay.
Second, combined arms operations. This includes maneuver, wide area security, armored ops, airborne, air assault, the whole package.
Using all the different tools together.
Exactly. Third, special operations. Fourth, setting and sustaining the theater, the logistics and support piece. Again, vital for the entire joint force.
Enabling everyone else.
And fifth, integrating national, multinational, and joint power effectively on land, bringing all the pieces together where it matters most.
That's comprehensive, and this all happens under an umbrella concept, unified land operations.
Right. Think of that as the Army's overall approach or doctrine for land warfare.
How does it work?
It's about simultaneously combining offensive, defensive, and stability operations, sometimes defense support to civil authorities too.
Doing multiple things at once.
And doing it across all domains, land, air, cyber, etc., and crucially, in sync with joint, allied, and interagency partners. Unified action.
Goal being
Defeat the enemy, control terrain, protect people, and maintain freedom of action. It's holistic.
an integrated approach for a complex world. Looking ahead now, ADP 1 touches on the future, the Army vision. What's the focus there?
Well, the core Army mission doesn't really change. Deploy, fight, and win our wars. provide ready, sustained land dominance for the joint force.
That's the constant.
But the Army Vision 2028 gets more specific. It aims for an army ready to deploy, fight, and win decisively.
Decisively.
In joint, multi-domain, high-intensity conflict, while also deterring others and keeping up irregular warfare skills.
Covering all the bases. How do they plan to achieve that?
Through 5 main objectives, all linked. Man the force getting the right people. Organize effectively. Train realistically. Equip with modern gear. And lead with adaptive leaders.
Man, organize, train, equip, lead.
That's the framework.
Okay.
It covers everything needed to ensure the Army stays the world's premier land force, ready for whatever comes next.
It's really clear from ADP 1, the Army is so much more than just a fighting force.
Oh, absolutely.
Its roles are incredibly varied, deeply tied into our national security, our place in the world.
Definitely. As we've kind of walked through here, the U.S. Army is this vital, enduring institution. Its role is multifaceted, way beyond just combat. Its structure, its capabilities, that long history.
Yeah.
It all shows why it's indispensable. For the joint force, for protecting our interests.
So for you listening, hopefully you now have maybe a deeper, more nuanced grasp of the why. The foundational ideas behind the Army's purpose, its necessity. We've tried to get beyond just headlines and into the core doctrine.
Which brings up a good question for you to think about.
Yeah.
With the world constantly changing, technology advancing so fast, how might the Army's roles evolve in the future?
That's a big question.
And maybe more personally, thinking about all these different missions, combat, deterrence, shaping, relief, what aspects do you think are most critical today?
Good food for thought.
Yeah. And hey, if you're really interested, you could always dig into ADP 1 itself or maybe research some of those historical campaigns we touched on.
For an even deeper understanding.
Exactly.